Thank you. Welcome to Safe, Efficient, Profitable, a worker safety podcast, where we break down real problems from real situations and discuss realistic solutions. And here are your hosts, owners of Allen Safety LLC, Joe and Jen Allen.
Good day, everybody. We have another amazing podcast. That's right. And this one is the second part of our stress series. Part of the series should be how it is to make these podcasts with somebody in the table here with you. When someone's looking at you like, do it right, You're trying to do this thing politely. All right, so here we go. Yeah. Right. Last week was about, if you're listening on podcasts or anywhere you listen, you can. If you want to watch it, you can listen to YouTube. But last week was about how to yourself manage the stress. This one is about all the interactions that's going to come to you, like people and working with them and how to help manage it. So we thought we'd do one on this because that is a current theme all the time.
Most of what we hear is negative.
Yeah, let's be
call and they're like, hey, things are going great.
Yeah, how was your day today? We just thought we'd check in on you. So because we live in the world
problem.
Yeah, so let's just talk about that. All right, so here we go. So the first thing we're going to talk about is on our list here. You got a timeline set by yourself and others. So now we have a dog that just came in for anybody that's listening. We have a German Shepherd. I guess she wants to be part of this podcast. Anyway, so what could be arbitrary? The dog walking in the middle of your podcast. That could be one of them. Timelines.
Well, I guess my deal is you can have timelines and you have what you want your timeline to be in your head. You're like, this should be great. This is adequate. I think it's really realistic. And that's not true at all.
No, even in this household, that is probably one of the number one.
My timelines are always too aggressive. That's what's on this list.
Yeah. So Jen will say, why can't we get this done tomorrow? And I say it takes 2 to 3 weeks. And then we spend an hour or two discussing why we lost that hour.
Always underestimate the length of time for projects too. Yeah. I'm like, I think this should take about an hour and it ends up taking like 7.
Yeah. So you can't be too aggressive. You got to be real. What realistic means is what everybody agrees to, not just you. Because if you don't watch it, you will set guidelines for your team and almost turn your team right off. They just think I can't do it. And then they just stop.
They just stop. And that's I think a huge part of that is have a plan. I'm really good at that with work. I am horrific at that in my personal life. I have no plan going into most projects that we do. I'm like, we're just going to do this. We're going to put all this mulch and build this garden and build all these beds and go get all this dirt.
One bag of rock will not cover the back. We learned that. Okay? And it doesn't take one trip to the hardware store for one bag.
Have a detailed plan. Yeah. It's going to be a larger scale project.
And you got to stick with it. And what happens is you got to be, here's my plan. Here's how I'm going to execute that plan. Here's what I need from you. And and you may have expectations, but if they are so far out of line with what they think can happen, you've got to pull that back a little bit. Because I would tell you, in our company,
it's hard for people to follow you.
That's correct.
Because they don't believe you.
We run the company a year and a half out. So if you're telling somebody in the next 30 minutes they have to lock out a piece of machinery a certain way, they're not looking a year and a half out. They want to know how to get in 20 minutes. So you got to look at how you can manage that 20 minutes and how to get them to that year and a half. That's maybe your plan, but you got to almost have a separate plan on how to get them to that point.
Well, and I think a big part of that too is, how do you stick with your plan when the wheels start falling off the wagon? And I think it's remembering who your clients are, and it's your employees. You as a manager and as a leader and in a leadership position, you're representing them basically and trying to advocate for them.
Right.
And almost in a way. And I think that just keeping that in mind and keeping that focus of, maybe it didn't go right or things are falling apart, but the end goal is to make something better for this group, and we got to see that through.
Yes, if you don't watch it, you'll basically have no customer service. What they're going to look at you like? They're going to look at you like, I'm your customer. what kind of quality you bring into me, and you want them to feel that you're a resource, that you're helping, you're the positive reinforcement of it. The second they feel that it is all the stress is on them and there is no solution, they don't even go backwards, they just turn it off.
Well, I think we've all probably at some point or another worked for managers who are just really short, really abrasive, not great people skills. And it was difficult to follow those people. It was difficult to support them. It was difficult to really see their vision.
Yeah, and I will tell you, just because of the timing in history, myself and some of my team, we've seen the old style has disappeared in a lot of locations, and there is a new style. But if the manager's still there from the old style, it's hard for them to adapt. And so you will hear comments from people say, well, they just don't understand, or it's just that, whatever. And I'm like, no, our job is whatever that person's doing that day, whatever methodology we have to do to get them to understand it. We got to be liaison, but we've got to restructure the way we train or we look at the puzzle also. I will tell you, I'm not the same company I was 20 years ago. Even as a human, I'm not the same person I was. No, I'm not the same. I look at the world as so part of that stress.
Part of that was in meetings regularly getting cursed and screamed at.
Right. So that was the environment.
The louder you yell,
that's who won.
You won the argument.
Right. So nowadays it's more of it's a completely different business model. So I've had to adapt, and everyone has to adapt. But the point of it is you have to manage that stress that person. Because if you manage the way you did with some of the current people 20 years ago, they just leave. And now the stress, they left. So now my team's short on the floor. And now their stress just went up because you just lost one other person that was helping them. So they don't look at the person as being at fault when they left. They look at you that you didn't manage the stress right. You created more stress for them. You have to manage the stress and manage your team.
Well, and another one that goes along with that is I found that sometimes employees are not understanding a change or a modification or, doing something in a different way. It's to help them. It's not helping the company. It's to make it better for them, and they're not seeing that. They see it as an extra step. And so I think part of what we miss sometimes is quantifying. This is making it better for you. It's not making the company any money. It's not being more efficient necessarily for the company. This is literally just for you to make your life better. And, sometimes they just get a little disconnected from that a little bit. And they just see it as an extra step. And it's like, no, this is just to make sure that you don't lose your arm so that you can shake hands with your family and hold a baby.
That's it. And we did a class last week.
Baseball?
It's exactly what I did a class last week, and they said something to me, and I'm like, yeah, but it doesn't matter what you believe at that moment. What matters is the end result, that you don't get hurt, period. So whatever methodology it takes to get them to see that picture, and they say, oh, I get it. Because you can't manage them after you leave. The idea of managing them is that their stress and their overall day, if they feel like the stress level went down because of your idea, they have a better chance of doing it when you're not there. And that's the end goal, is to make them safer and reduce the risk. But they think it's going to make their day worse, and their stress goes up, then there's a chance they'll skip a few steps because they think, well, it's made my day worse with stress. Yeah. So that's the control. I got to take that stress and make them show how it benefits them. And then when they see that, they're like, all right. And then they're all bought into it.
Well, that's my thing. I think that, yes, everyone should care about their safety. And yes, I'm an advocate that theoretically they should care about it more than anybody else. But that is not always true if they're feeling that stress, because they're more worried about not getting a job completed on time and how that looks, and are they going to get fired for that?
Sure.
Necessarily than some of the other things. And so we really want to make sure that we take the time, break it down, quantify it, why they care. Back in the day, they used to have the old high impact videos like for lockout.
Yeah, and I know
we don't do those anymore because they were weird. They were not the best all the time. But part of what I think the intent of those was to like bridge the gap and like, here's why you should care.
Right. And now we've almost
saying that we're like, just lock out, just do it because we said you got to do it here.
I'm more into, if you see me have any issue, you want to go, let's find out why they did it that way. and let's find out what made them do it. And it's most of the time it's stress. Most of the time is I felt behind, I felt this, or I felt I was going to get in trouble. So it's a stress mechanisms making that action.
Emotion.
So I spend time on how do we reduce the stress in the next 10 minutes.
So articulate, here's the risk.
Correct.
Do you understand like what this can do? Because you also got to remember, we've got so many new people.
That's right.
They don't know.
That's right.
They have no idea what some of the risk is in some of these different jobs, working at elevation or working with chemicals and mixing them. They got disconnected because it's just so routine.
And if someone doesn't show up on a Monday or a Tuesday, they feel like the stress goes up. So you have to, as a manager, you need to manage when everyone's fully staffed, and then have a plan that someone's not going to show up Monday.
Yeah.
Then and the more that information you communicate to team that this is our plan because we know this happens, their stress level is going to go down. And I actually think they perform better. And you almost make up that time the other person didn't show up because they feel like there's an idea, there's a plan. When people don't feel like there's a plan, they stress. If I go on site and there's any kind of event going on, most of mine is to calm everyone down and put a real plan together. We all agree. And it's amazing how much better things turn out.
Well, when you have an organized plan, it is more efficient.
Yep.
And you can get more things done. And so again, I think it's just, you've got different data. You got to also remember as a manager than the employees do on the floor.
Yes.
And so it's just also keeping that in mind of that's part of why communication is so important. It's determining, here's information that is critical. I'm coming from a different viewpoint than everyone else on the floor because I've got different information.
Right. So you may expect it to be done next week, but they're like, well, how are you going to do this in 5 months? Because you've already seen meetings and graphs and concepts. So part of that is you don't tell them everything because it's almost information overload. Again, like we talked in the episode, just in a different way. You got to get started. This is the part you'll have by that week, and then we have a plan for that. And if we get this done, we have a next step. But letting them know there's that next step, letting them know the time, it calms them down a lot.
Yeah.
All right. So another one we look at.
Your timeline isn't necessarily anybody else's.
No, I have a timeline. Even my own staff doesn't agree with it, and most of my plants don't agree with what I think can happen.
Well,
so.
Yes. Part of it is quantifying why anybody should even care about your timeline.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing. It's like everybody has timelines.
Yep.
So why does yours trump everybody else's? And that's the biggest question is you've got to really get good at communicating, I think, if you want buy-in on why it benefits them, why they care.
Yes, I look at it like the more they feel like they understand the process and the buy-in and how it benefits them and their stress. I spend a lot of time on the stress. Does it affect your family? Does it affect your home life? Does it affect, for my team, does it affect when you can be off certain days? I mean, that's their stressors. And anything I can do to translate that, they seem to do better.
Yeah. And so I think part of it, again, is acknowledging you don't know what anybody else has going on personally.
Sure.
And so you got to acknowledge that.
So like, for example, say you're new to the role and you decide you're going to be doing like I tag our procedures and you've never worked at our industry. Well, there's a thing called fresh season, and Jen worked in that industry a long time. Now, on my side of the world, for the cattle side, we had different seasons. Well, just like any industry, I mean, you don't always grill out a steak in January. Well, you eat a ham during the winter. So it changes the way people. So even doing a procedure on what time of year can create stress to people and how you want to manage that process.
I walked up and I realized as a new manager, new to that business, new to that location, oh my goodness, they don't have any of these done. But I don't know anything about the equipment.
No, I feel like they're all going to be done tomorrow.
And now I have to rely on the maintenance person to do them because I'm not mechanically inclined or I don't know the equipment. I haven't been here that long, but it's really important to me that these get done. And they're like, this is our busiest season. It's really important to everybody else that we keep the floor running. I'm not saying your lockout procedure isn't important, but if they all understand lockout and are able to execute that correctly,
it's hard to explain that to them.
They are not interested in your procedure. And so it's also understanding that side of the business too, is that you got to quantify. And so then that rolls into, so is now the time that you become an expert because no one else can help you because their timelines may actually truly be a little bit more important than yours in that moment.
And for those of you who want to know about the history of our company, I don't even know how many hours I spend on locations watching them do a process because I can't be the expert unless I understand a little better. So what I do is I try to make that time. And that's all we're saying to you. If you're walking on you're a manager and you go out and you have a task you want done and you're not really good at it and they're pretty busy, maybe just pause 15 minutes and watch them do it and learn how to do it. Because then when you go do that meeting next time with them, both your stress levels are going to be lower because they saw you watching, not being weird. They saw you watching, and you both have a different way of looking at the puzzle, and you make it different. So both your stress, both your stress levels come down to get to the solution.
Well, and it goes back to just because you can doesn't mean that you necessarily should. So you've also got to evaluate, okay, so if you can't do the lockout procedures because you don't have the data, how long is it going to take you to do them? Or the confined space procedures, or the SOPs, or the PPE assessments, or whatever that thing is that you need the input of somebody else because you are not that subject matter expert. Well, it's evaluating, do you become the expert and you have the free time in evaluating what your list looks like? And if the answer to that is no, in my world, that's when you start looking at outsourcing.
Absolutely.
I can fix the plumbing in our house.
I can't for anybody else to know.
Well, I feel comfortable.
I can't. Let's keep it real here.
To say that
I'm the one with the engineering degree.
I feel comfortable that I can look up YouTube videos. I can figure it out. I'm comfortable enough to keep it or low.
Everybody understands that ammonia is a liquid that goes to a pipe, and I know how to do all of that. But the idea of cutting the pipe, that's the part I have trouble with. And making it not leak at that point.
But part of my thing is do I really need to sit and watch all these videos to teach myself how to do this? Or do I need to focus on there's only a certain set of skills that I can do and no one else can? Maybe I need to stay focused on that and I hire a plumber.
So we hire a company that does line breaks of the plant. We hire a plumber it's the same thing. You got to know where your expertise is, and you got to know, I may be able to do it, but this is not. So that stress that you're creating yourself doesn't mean you should. Right. So you get thrown out. So are you efficient at that moment if you don't know what you're doing? No. Are you wasting time? Yes. Are you losing possible profitability in time? Yes.
Stay focused on the subject matter experts that only you can do. That's going to help a lot.
That's right. So, all right. Next one is we're talking about meetings, because I think everybody they have the email that we're going to have the meeting, and then we're going to send a text reminder we've got the meeting coming up, and then there's an alert on your phone that's going to tell you got 15 minutes for the meeting, and then I've got to walk to the meeting, and then I get to the meeting, get out of the meeting, and have my list of all things I got to do from that meeting. But I go back, but I have to have an email recap of the meeting. I'm like,
sidebar with your other coworkers
of all the stuff that we just went over, how are we going to do this stuff on the meeting to meet the timeline? And by the way, the other meeting at 2:00 this afternoon has to come up with solutions that we never got done from the first meeting.
Yeah.
So what happens is the meetings themselves can just be a stressor with the way that the process is currently moving, and people feel I worked 12 hours, and what did I really get done that was my job? Maybe they feel like they were part of groups or part of committees, but they feel the stress. My list is still growing. So even if they're in the meeting, are they there or are they detached because they're so stressed on their? So the stress of the meeting could cause them the stress in the meeting to make the meeting not as beneficial, basically.
Well, and I think the other side of that coin too is if you do speak up and you did put a lot of time into coming up with a solution and you just get completely shut
down. That's a great idea, but
we're never going to do that.
Yeah.
That's disheartening also.
Yes, it makes you feel like, well, then why? Your stress then goes from I was stressed about the presentation to now I'm stressed to, well, no one thinks I'm important or valued. And now you go down, and it's not that. You got to regroup and look at the way you present.
Yeah. Did you quantify your idea on how it benefits all the other folks that are stakeholders that it's going to affect? I think that's the biggest one is delivery a lot of times. Did you hit the key points of what's important to your audience? Did you tell them about returns on investment? Did you tell them how long it's going to take? If you've got it, how many labor hours is it going to save us?
Yeah, if you've got production system, a GM, assistant GM, a plant superintendent, and you can quantify to them how it makes their life easier and drops their stress, you listen more.
Yeah.
And if you talk to the engineer and you talk about how it helps his labor and stress and downtime, they will listen. So you got to have a little piece of the puzzle for everybody in the room to show if they're stressed. We're not talking about all show them how their stress level goes down, and they're like, anyway, people hear me at plants say all the time, I don't want to change everything you're doing. I just want to make it easier. And when I say that, people are like, well, let's go look at it as a group. It's amazing how many people want to go when you start off with that.
Yeah. Yep. And I think part of it is you have to also understand it isn't always about you. So you can't take it personal, even as hard as that is to not take it personal.
Absolutely.
You got to remember it may not always be about you. There may be some other things going on you don't have information about.
I have all kinds of places that situations or issues that I think, we could have done that better in some way. But then I find out 6 months later, a year later, that there was all this other stuff going on that I didn't have the information to at that time. So I was, hard on myself a little bit, stressed. Oh, how did I not do that better? Whatever. When I found out it was never, no matter what I would do, there was another thing going on, and if you don't have that data, you can't take all that personally. You got to take all that's that's my day, and I tried my heart out on it. I go forward.
Well, and again, and part of it is especially if you're in the safety role and you've seen catastrophic injuries.
You look at things different
in a past career at another job or by proxy because it happened, at one of your sister locations at a different company or a personal friend or something. You have a different feeling towards that subject. And if you're trying to talk to a room full of people who don't have that, then they're not going to have the same emotion about it.
Correct. So what I do is I look at it like, how do you explain it to them? Like Jim's talking about, you got to put it in a format that they understand, and then to get that buy-in, because you'll just feel like you're just not being listened to almost, and that creates stress.
Yep. So I think it's just understanding, and then at the end of the day, if you just keep getting no, I think it's also understanding sometimes in the safety role, your job is to just advise and support.
That's what I tell people. That's my number one role.
Because if they just keep saying, no, we're not going to do that. No, that's not a priority. No, we don't have capital. We've got to focus on these other things. There does come a point where it's just like, okay, well, I am communicating that I see this risk. If that's not a priority at this time, I'm trying to...
But you keep it on your list.
Trying to impress upon you that it is. But then the legal part of me also would suggest that you start writing that in an email and not have verbal conversations. Some of that too. Yeah, especially if it's something that's really risky or catastrophic. Like you're like, this truly is bad, though, you guys.
People feel stressed that they have nowhere to move to.
Yeah.
So I write everything down if I feel stressed.
Yeah.
Right, wrong, differently. I just write it down, because then it also gets it off of me that I feel like I did something. At least I got the data out, and if I'm asked late or something, it's not me trying to remember everything. So I do that as a stress relief for myself.
Well, yeah, that is a good point, that you can always go back and you're like, okay, well, if we're tabling this, I'm going to document it out that we're tabling it from the legal part is part of it, but also so that I can go back and read this email when we do decide we're going to.
And I'm ready to go then.
And I can pick up where I left off.
I've actually just re-forwarded.
Yeah.
Oh, here you go from 5 months ago.
Yeah. Yeah, because sometimes, there's so many things that can happen in a 5 month period, 6 month period of time. You forget where you were. You're like, oh, I closed that out. That part of my brain just completely shut off. I have no idea where we're at.
So your job as a manager, whatever role it is to take care of your people, educate them to make them successful, and do everything just help them overall. And part of that is relieving their stress. If you can, if someone's got to drop their kids off at school at a certain time of day, changing a 15-minute process for them and what time they get to be there could change their whole day.
Yeah.
If you take,
drop off and pick up stress, especially if you've got daycare and they're charging you by the minute, and then they're saying you can't go if you're late.
So I actually, when I'm in any plant, that's one of the first things I talk about. Is everybody okay being here today? And if someone says, hey, I got to get my kids by 3, I say right at the beginning, I will make sure you're out what time you got to go. And when they tell me, their whole mood changes, because they're
edgy. They think that they got to be there every second. It's like, we can modify a break. We can modify a lunch. We can change.
We can modify what order we do the drill in for you.
Yep.
Whatever
it is.
Some
stuff maybe tomorrow if we have to.
And I've done that. I will say, okay, well, we won't look at your area today. We'll look at it tomorrow, so you can do what you need to do with your family. And their whole presentation, the whole way they're going to manage their relationship with you is completely different, because you've managed the stress for them.
Which then goes back to the training episode we just did of now they're open to learn. They're more receptive. It's a psychological thing. It's a shift of now they're more open-minded. They're going to participate. We're going to come up with better ideas, which is also relieving stress for everybody else.
Absolutely. So, all right. Well, that's where we're at today, folks. We're at a daily life, job experience. Be exciting. Be happy.
You've got this.
Yep, you'll be amazing whatever you do.
Just
And
keep trying and be positive. Just try and be positive.
yep, have that time for yourself. Take care of your family and friends, and let the stress not overtake your day, because it can if you don't watch it.
Yep.
It's there.
Yep.
So there's always one more thing to do and one more thing to do on the list.
Yep. All right, guys.
Thank you.
Wonderful day.
All right. Have a good day, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to Safe, Efficient, Profitable, a worker safety podcast. If you're looking for more in-depth discussions or step-by-step solutions on all of the different safety and regulatory topics, please visit us at www.allensafetycoaching.com for web-based virtual coaching and training, or at www.allen-safety.com to book our team for on-site services, training sessions, to order merchandise, to learn more about our team and what services we provide in the field, or just simply to request a topic for us to cover on our next podcast. If you found today's podcast helpful and would like to support our podcast further, please help us by subscribing, liking, and sharing this podcast with anyone that could benefit from the information we cover here, as that helps us to continue to put out this free content. Thank you so much for your support.